The old man walked into the gun shop with slow, deliberate steps, his worn red jacket hanging loose on his thin frame. His white beard was neatly trimmed, but his clothes told a different story, one of hardship and struggle. Behind the counter, two young employees barely looked up from their phones. When they finally noticed him, their eyes swept over him with barely concealed disdain. The taller one, maybe 25 with slicked-back hair and an expensive watch, smirked at his co-worker. The old man approached the counter quietly, his sad eyes fixed on the display case beneath the glass. He pointed to a specific rifle, a model that most casual buyers wouldn't recognize. The employee with the watch laughed. "You can't afford to look at that, old-timer. That's a precision instrument, not some pawn shop special." His friend joined in. "Yeah, maybe try the sporting goods store down the street. They might have something more in your price range." The old man's expression didn't change. He simply repeated his request, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'd like to see that rifle, please. It's the same model I used." The employees exchanged glances. Used for what? Scaring pigeons in the park? The laughter was cruel, cutting through the store like a blade. The old man had been coming to this part of town for weeks now, ever since he'd moved into the small apartment above the laundromat. Nobody knew much about him. He kept to himself, took long walks in the early morning, and sometimes sat on the bench outside the library for hours, just watching people pass by. His red jacket had become a familiar sight in the neighborhood, though few bothered to acknowledge him. He was just another forgotten face in a city full of them. The apartment was sparse, containing little more than a bed, a small table, and a wooden chair. On the wall hung a single photograph, faded and worn at the edges, showing a much younger version of himself in uniform, surrounded by other young men with serious faces and determined eyes. But nobody ever came to visit, nobody ever asked about the photograph, and the old man never volunteered his story. Back in the gun shop, the situation was escalating. The employee with the watch had moved from mockery to outright hostility. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're making the other customers uncomfortable." The old man looked around the empty store, then back at the employee. "There are no other customers." The employee's face flushed red. "That's not the point. This is a serious establishment. We cater to professionals, collectors, people who know what they're looking at. Not every homeless guy who wanders in off the street." "I'm not homeless," the old man said quietly. "I have an apartment on 5th Street. The other employee leaned forward, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, an apartment on 5th Street. Real fancy. Look, Grandpa, why don't you go back to your apartment and take a nap or something? We've got real customers to deal with." The old man's hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I just wanted to see the rifle. I served with that model. I know every part of it, every mechanism. I could field strip it blindfolded." The employees burst into laughter again. This time it was louder, more mocking. "Oh, you served, did you? Let me guess, Vietnam? Korea?" The old man nodded slowly. "Both." The laughter died down to chuckles. "Sure you did, buddy. And I'm a Navy SEAL. Look, we get guys like you in here all the time, spinning stories, trying to get attention. It's pathetic." The old man reached into his jacket pocket, and both employees tensed, but he only pulled out a worn wallet, opening it to reveal a faded military ID card. The employees barely glanced at it. "That could be anyone's. You probably found it at a thrift store." The old man closed the wallet and put it back in his pocket. His sad eyes seemed to grow even more distant, as if he was looking at something far beyond the walls of the gun shop, something these young men could never understand. He turned to leave, his shoulders slightly more hunched than when he'd entered. Just as he reached the door, it swung open with such force that it banged against the wall. A man in his 50s strode in, his presence filling the entire shop. He wore a suit that spoke of success and authority, and his eyes immediately locked onto the old man in the red jacket. The man in the suit froze, his face going pale. His briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a heavy thud. The employees behind the counter straightened up immediately. "Mr. Harrison," they said in unison. The owner of the gun shop, Marcus Harrison, didn't acknowledge them. His eyes were fixed on the old man, and tears were beginning to form. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, and then, to the absolute shock of everyone present, dropped to one knee. His head bowed. "Sir," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "Sir, I never thought I'd see you again." The old man looked down at him, and for the first time something shifted in his expression. Recognition flickered across his weathered face. "Harrison? Little Marcus Harrison?" The shop owner nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He looked up, tears now streaming freely down his face. "You saved my father's life, sir. You carried him 3 miles through enemy fire. You took a bullet meant for him. You're the reason I exist. You're the reason my children exist." The old man placed a gentle hand on Harrison's shoulder. "Your father was a good man. He would have done the same for me." Harrison shook his head vigorously. "No, sir. With all due respect, what you did went beyond duty. My father told me the story 100 times before he passed. How you refused to leave him behind when everyone else said it was suicide to go back. How you held off an entire platoon while medics got to him. How you never once complained about the injury you sustained, even though it ended your military career." Behind the counter, the 2 employees had gone completely silent. Their faces were ashen, their earlier bravado evaporated like morning mist. Harrison finally rose to his feet, but his posture remained respectful, reverent. He turned to face his employees, and his voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "What exactly happened here before I arrived?" The employee with the watch stammered. We didn't know. We thought." Harrison cut him off. "You thought what? That you could judge a man by his jacket, by his age, by the fact that he walks a little slower than you do." The other employee tried to speak. "Mr. Harrison, we're sorry. We didn't realize." "Didn't realize what? That he's a human being who deserves respect. That he's a decorated veteran who served this country before you were even born. That he's a genuine hero who asked for nothing in return for his sacrifice." Harrison's voice was rising now, and the employees were shrinking back. The old man spoke softly. "Marcus, it's all right. They didn't know." Harrison turned back to him, his expression softening immediately. "Sir, with all due respect, it's not all right. They should have treated you with basic human decency, regardless of whether they knew your service record. That's the bare minimum we owe every person who walks through that door." He turned back to his employees. "You're both fired. Effective immediately. Clean out your lockers and leave your keys on the counter." The employees' faces went from pale to ghostly white. "But Mr. Harrison, please. We made a mistake. We'll apologize. We'll do better." Harrison shook his head. "You had your chance to do better. You chose mockery instead. You chose judgment instead of service. This shop was built on the principle of respect for every customer, and you violated that principle in the worst possible way. Now leave." As the former employees gathered their belongings and slunk toward the back room, Harrison turned his full attention back to the old man. "Sir, I owe you an apology on behalf of this establishment. What you experienced here today is unacceptable and inexcusable." The old man waved his hand dismissively. "I've experienced worse, Marcus. Much worse. I know you have, sir, but that doesn't make this right." Harrison walked behind the counter and carefully removed the rifle the old man had originally requested. He brought it out and placed it gently on the counter. "This is the one you wanted to see?" The old man nodded, and for the first time, a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. He reached out and ran his fingers along the barrel, with the familiarity of someone greeting an old friend. Same weight, same balance. They don't make them like this anymore. Harrison watched him with reverence. "Sir, I want you to have it. Consider it a gift, a token of gratitude that doesn't even begin to repay what you did for my family." The old man looked up sharply. "Marcus, I can't accept that. This is a expensive piece." Harrison's voice was firm. "Sir, I insist. My father spent the last 20 years of his life trying to find you, to thank you properly. He passed away 3 years ago, and his greatest regret was that he never got the chance. Please, let me do this for him. Let me honor his memory and your service." The old man's eyes grew misty. "Your father was one of the best men I ever served with. We lost touch after I was discharged. I moved around a lot, never stayed in one place too long. I didn't know he'd been looking for me." Harrison nodded. "He never stopped talking about you. He told everyone he met about the man who saved his life. He donated to veteran causes in your name. He made sure I understood the meaning of real courage, real sacrifice." The old man carefully picked up the rifle, feeling its weight, testing the sight. It brought back memories, some painful, some bittersweet. He thought of the young men he'd served with, the ones who'd made it home, and the ones who hadn't. He thought of the choices he'd made, the split-second decisions that had altered the course of lives. He thought of the long years after his discharge, the struggle to find his place in a world that had moved on without him. Harrison broke the silence. "Sir, if I may ask, what brought you to my shop today?" The old man set the rifle down gently. "I wanted to feel useful again, even if just for a moment. I wanted to remember when I had a purpose, when my skills mattered. I thought maybe handling a familiar weapon would bring back some of that feeling." Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. "Sir, I have a proposal. I need someone with real knowledge to help run this shop. Someone who understands these weapons not just as products but as tools that require respect and responsibility. Would you consider working here?" The old man looked surprised. "Marcus, I'm 72 years old. I'm not sure I'm what you need." Harrison smiled. "Sir, you're exactly what I need. You're what this shop needs. You're what every young person who walks through that door needs. Someone who can teach them not just about firearms, but about respect, about service, about the weight of responsibility that comes with these weapons." The old man was quiet for a long moment, and then he nodded slowly. "I'd be honored, Marcus." Harrison extended his hand, and they shook, a firm grip that bridged generations and sealed an understanding. Then Harrison did something unexpected. He walked to the front of the store and flipped the closed sign. "Come with me, sir. There's something I want to show you." He led the old man to a back office, where on the wall hung a photograph. It showed a younger Harrison standing next to an older man in a veteran's cap. "That's my father," Harrison said quietly. "That was taken at the last veterans reunion he attended. He never gave up hope of finding you." The old man stared at the photograph, and a tear rolled down his weathered cheek. "He looks good, happy." "He was," Harrison said. "Because of you, he got to live a full life. He got to see me grow up, got to meet his grandchildren, got to make a difference in his community. All because you refused to leave him behind." The old man shook his head slowly. "I was just doing my job." Harrison turned to face him directly. "Sir, with all respect, it was more than a job. It was a choice. You chose to risk everything for a fellow soldier. You chose to value his life over your own safety. That's not just duty, that's heroism." The old man looked uncomfortable with the praise. "A lot of men did the same thing. Many didn't make it home. I know, sir, and we honor them all. But today, right now, I get to honor you. I get to make sure you know that your sacrifice mattered, that it continues to matter." They returned to the main shop, and Harrison immediately began making calls. Within an hour, word had spread through the local veteran community. Old soldiers started arriving, some in wheelchairs, some with canes, all wanting to meet the man who'd become something of a legend through the stories Harrison's father had told. Each one shook the old man's hand with reverence, thanking him not just for his specific act of heroism, but for representing the best of what they'd all tried to be. The old man was overwhelmed, unused to such attention, but gradually his posture changed. His shoulders straightened slightly. The perpetual sadness in his eyes was joined by something else, something that looked almost like peace. Harrison stood back and watched, knowing that his father would have been proud of this moment, this gathering, this recognition of a man who'd asked for nothing but deserved everything. As the sun began to set and the veterans slowly departed, each with promises to return and visit, Harrison and the old man sat together in the quiet shop. "So when do I start?" the old man asked. Harrison smiled. "How about tomorrow morning? We open at 9. The old man nodded. "I'll be here at 8:30. Harrison laughed. "I wouldn't expect anything less, sir." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then the old man spoke again. "Marcus, thank you. Not just for the job, but for remembering, for caring, for making an old man feel like he still has something to offer." Harrison's voice was thick with emotion again. "Sir, you have everything to offer. Your experience, your wisdom, your example. This community needs you. I need you. And I think, maybe, you need this too." The old man nodded slowly, and for the first time in many years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten. He felt like he belonged.